everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blockchain Marketing Insights. Technicals are being worked on as we speak, but we're getting it done. Some big news happening today in the world of crypto and marketing, and it's our duty to bring it to you. But before we do, let us remind you, this show is all about entertainment. We're not a financial show, we're not a financial advice show. I'm not a financial advisor, and we're not selling you anything financial. If you're doing any kind of investment, that's your own thing. So do your own research, because you're responsible for your own actions. Don't be a fool with your money. We're here to talk about marketing. And that's that. So the disclaimer is out of the way. And there you go. There's a lot happening. We're just waiting here for the folks in the VIP to turn on the connection. Tune in. And there you go. And just another little minute. We'll get this show underway. And we're going straight to the city of brotherly love to start this off in a few minutes. Where we're going to be signing off on everything that's going on here. You may notice some strange technicals in the comments today, but that's fine. And that's fine. We're going to do everything we can. Hey, Italy, what's going on? Hello, Spain. And hello. Oh, hey there. What's up, Chicago? People, good to see you all. Yes, we're connected to YouTube. So all the YouTubers can say hi. I'd be happy to hear you guys. And there you go. So another day, another market movement in a significant way for cryptocurrency. And welcome everybody again to Blockchain Marketing Insights. I'm your host, Yasha Harari, and we're looking at some significant stories here today. They're jumping all over this in the VIP, suggesting, and in a few minutes, probably less, we're going to have the final tally, and we're just going to go over that. But for now, we're going to look real quick at what happened in the markets. And actually today we're going to start, you can see here we've hit 2,100 cryptocurrencies on CoinMarketCap. So ring a bell or whatever. Total market cap is 133 billion. And the Bitcoin dominance is at 51.7, regaining a little bit of a scratch it had yesterday. And hold on a second. Hold on, folks. We're just testing something here with a new web stream situation, and to respond to the folks in the VIP lounge, yes, we will be discovering some other options for the stream, and also we will be going over those last two topics in this live stream that you just mentioned. And in a minute, we're going to tell everyone what that is. For some strange reason, they didn't fit in the description today. I don't know why. Some weird thing happened. Hang on a second. I apologize for the sound of the typing. That's just low tech, but what can you do? We use keyboards sometimes. I know. How 20th century, right? But there you go. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, more or less, we are done here. So, folks, again, one last time, and this should be all it takes to do the intro. You're on Blockchain Marketing Insights, and we're looking at the market cap. And you can see here in the biggest gainers and losers. One of them is Engine Coin. 76% up on the day compared to yesterday. What's interesting about that is that news happened, not that news, that gain happened at right around the same time that it was announced that it was confirmed that their hardware is included in the latest Samsung phone. So, of course, what does that mean? Well, that means that they're going to have millions and millions of people having their phone as of this year, right? Because Samsung sells something like 80 million phones a year. And if they sell even 10 or 20 million of these new phones this year, that's 10 or 20 million engine phones, right? Phones with Engine Coin wallet in them. And that means a bright future, at least in theory, for Engine Coin. So, naturally, they had a little bit of a pump. It's yet to be seen how many people will actually buy the phone. But all indications are that if you stick a product like a Samsung phone on the market, given their history for the past, whatever it is, 8 years, 9 years since they've been selling these phones, 8 years or so, they've been doing rather well selling smartphones. And it hasn't really slowed down too much, right? They've saturated the market, but people keep buying new phones because they keep losing old ones, breaking old ones just go obsolete. You know, they get too slow, they get too heavy, they get too whatever. People just like having new phones sometimes, so they buy a new phone. And so, yes, while the market is saturated, people are still buying new phones. And that also means that in a year from now, these new phones will be secondhand phones already to a lot of people. They'll have already sold them off, right? Sometimes people buy phones every number of months as opposed to years. As that's just something that some people do. And, we have to take into consideration that there will be secondhand phones easily within a year. I mean, the day that they come out, somebody will resell theirs to someone else who wants it for more money, and it will already be, technically speaking, a secondhand phone. So, I think that's very interesting news and great for the marketing of Engine Coin. If you're invested in that in any way as one of the marketers, or if you're looking at how that asset might grow thanks to good marketing, you could definitely chalk that one up to a win, because being confirmed to be a technology partner or provider to the first Samsung phone to include a crypto wallet in it, that is at the very least a good deal of authority for Engine Coin, and that will get them probably a nice chunk of additional business, even with other companies. Preferably for them, I'm sure, with other companies. Like, the whole point of making a big PR splash is that it doesn't just bring out more business with the same client you already have, although I'm sure they'd like that, but it will also give them the ability to reach out more easily and do deals with other companies. So again, if you are into Engine Coin, yesterday was a good day. Not every day is going to be like that, but in the long-term marketing aspect, it's a very good thing for the news to have come out officially. And you can see here that the price action obviously went up significantly, and they're now effectively at, in terms of Bitcoin prices, at all-time highs. And even at dollar prices, they're, I think, doing fairly well. Not all-time highs on the dollar price, but so, they peaked here dollar-wise at, what was it, 48 and a half cents, 48.67 cents. That was back in January of last year when the whole market was peaking right before the crash, and they have steadily gone through. Look at this. The bull market has just torn them apart until about, September of last year, and they started to kind of steady themselves, and they've been just building and building and building. And you can see, what have we been saying in crypto? In crypto marketing, right? We've been saying this is the time to build. This whole year was the opportunity to build, and deliver on tech. And look what happens the moment they delivered on tech, right? They delivered a product to Samsung that Samsung felt comfortable using in their consumer product. Like, this is a classic picture. If you think, and I know I'm not into technical analysis, I'm not looking at it. And of course, spikes, you always have to be careful with hyperbolic spikes. There's every chance that this will crash and the whole deal. But my point is, look at this response, right? In a matter of like 3 days, they went, from February, whatever, and like, when was it? When did this really last? Yeah, like 3 days ago, March 6th, March 7th. This is 1 day's action, March 7th to March 8th. Right? They shot back up in 1 day, on the 7th and 8th. That's it. 1 day they shot up. And previously, like 2 weeks ago, when news was coming out that this was possibly happening, right, that this was likely to be confirmed, they already had spiked up significantly. And again, when the news was sort of rumbling along that it was likely that there was a lot of excitement about the cold wallet, there's a lot of speculation, and here it was released, like leaks of it were released on video around this time back in January, and since then we've been seeing more and more leaks about it. And we had a slowly sideways moving, slightly downwards, but mostly sideways moving, market action on their coin, while the news, was still just hype, and this was the time to accumulate. For example, if you're an accumulator, and if you're a marketer, this was the time to put your, pedal to the metal and push forward with your campaigns, prepare for them for when the light is switched, prepare for your acquisitions funnel, etc. During this time, or do whatever you have to do, to grow your business at this particular time. And again, a few months before that, when there was, a general, look at this, yeah. So basically, we look at this entire year. This is a perfect example of them. They're literally working it. There's initial tea leaves, like there's the whole, the September thing that happened to a lot of coins. Plus, there was in the really deep discussion groups about the coin. There was discussion about what are some of the possible technology uses of the coin. And then, like I said, after the big dump of November that happened to everyone, right? Like Bitcoin and across the board, we saw that huge crash. So of course, Engine Coin was, I guess affected by that a little, maybe, who knows? But it seems to have been around that time. And again, they started crawling back and scratching back the whole time. And then as soon as the noise got, hyped that it might be in the coin, and when people were ignoring it, accumulators were buying it. As soon as the noise was more than just a possible rumor, but it was very likely to be confirmed, we saw a price spike. And then 2 weeks later, as soon as it was confirmed that tech is actually in the phone, boom, new Bitcoin highs for Engine Coin, right? So again, could this crash today? Yeah, prices always go up and down in crazy spikes in crypto, not a problem. But you see the reaction to positive news in what should be a normal market. And it's still crypto, so you can't really say this is a definitive claim or whatever for the victory of this particular marketing campaign. But what you can say, right, is that it's crypto, but in a consumer electronics market that has massive reach and massive user implication. Because again, the size of their channel, right, for distribution through Samsung is tens of millions of phones every year, right? Like 80 million a year. So it's very, it's not misplaced to say that this is a direct correlation of the effective marketing power of a global brand like Samsung putting its imprint on cryptocurrency. Right? They're saying we are Samsung, we make phones, And we are the world's leader in terms of Android phone sales, and we're introducing crypto to the market en masse in our latest phone. And of course, their latest phone is always the one that gets all the heavy marketing and is pushed throughout the year. You know, consider those implications, right? Think about how fast everybody bought smartphones when they first came out. And that was less than really 10 years ago when people started going crazy. It was about 10 years ago, right around the time people started getting into crypto. People, you know, at the very early OG, like right when Bitcoin hit the market, is pretty much when phones started to kind of hit their stride, right? And show that they were going to be the phones of the future and all that stuff. And everybody was buying them. And 2009, 10, 11, 12, those were critical years. Yeah, 2010, 11, 12. Those were critical years for the initial velocity, initial accelerated velocity, right? And yeah, so I think we're seeing that now in crypto. I've been saying for a while, if we see, you know, the more we see marketing projects move along, the more we're going to see this kind of reaction to people. To projects and coins that are in the crypto space. And this is, again, a perfect example of that happening. So good for Engine Coin, good for Samsung, good for the ecosystem, and hopefully great for consumers, right? That's really what this is all about. Like, that's ultimately what we're here for as marketers, is to deliver something of value to consumers. And in return, we get something of value for the company. And everybody's happy. We all go home, you know, more profited from the experience. So hopefully we'll see more of these things happening. The next story that we're going to look at today in Crypto Marketing Insights, or Blockchain Marketing Insights, whatever you want to call this show. People ask me, why do I always change the name around? Well, because sometimes we talk more about blockchain specifically stuff, and sometimes we speak more about cryptocurrencies, which are, yeah, sure, part of the blockchain, right? You know, like, they run on blockchain, right? But not every crypto is necessarily running on blockchain, and not every crypto is necessarily discussing things that are a broader blockchain issue, and vice versa. Not everything that is a blockchain topic is related to cryptocurrency or cryptocurrencies, however you want to say it. Not every blockchain product is strictly asset driven, right? There are some that are more focused on logistics or human resources or education or things that aren't necessarily for profit, even if someone's making money with them, or even if they're still used as money in some way. Their primary focus is other than the financial aspect of the coin, right? But here we have a story which actually is about the money of cryptocurrency versus the money of fiat centralized currency. And, you know, you guys hear me talk a lot about why I think cash is antiquated and crypto is wonderful. And you hear me talking about why I think it's important for people to be using cryptocurrency, and over time we're going to be seeing more and more cryptocurrency. But this story is actually maybe not what you would think I will say. So let's just go over this real quick. Philadelphia bans cashless businesses. Bad for Bitcoin. The story is posted on CCN, and ccn.com is a crypto news channel or a news website if you're not familiar with it. The link, again, is in the description, or will be after the stream is over, depending on when you signed in. And in the VIP room, it's already, the links are there already, because you guys actually saw those before we began the stream. So, the Wall Street Journal has reported that the Philadelphia is the latest jurisdiction to pass a law against not accepting cash. This is going to affect most of the shops in the city. Right? Most retailers are going to have to accept cash starting in July. there's basically a push by the Democrats who are leading the charge for these laws, and they see them as a way to protect people who don't have credit cards or debit cards. Okay? And the way that they're going about it, of course, is very political. So New York City Councilman Richie Torres also is, saying that cashless payments are the future. However, backing a proposal requiring local businesses to accept cash is something that he's actually in favor of. Right? He said that he thinks, quote, "I think it's more the future than a fad, and that's why there is a need for a legislative response." Okay, so he's a politician, granted a local New York councilman, who's saying that, yeah, cashless is the future. Like, you can't get out of it. And cashless, we all know crypto is basically cashless. I know the SOV is a special circumstance. We've spoken about that. They're going to have a cash version of their crypto in some way. It'll be interesting to see how it actually ends up being, but that's their plan. But for the most part, crypto is cashless. No coins involved, no paper involved. It's just digital. And it's amazing and powerful and fast and transmutable and transferable and transportable and immutable and the whole deal. But that is obviously a different class of asset than cash, right? Which is very physical, very tangible, has its own properties. Whether even for someone who doesn't think very much of centralized banking, you have to admit there's a lot of art, first of all, and goes into creating these pieces of currency, and nothing else, right? There are collectors who collect interesting documents. So money is a kind of document, whether it's metal, or it's a coin, or it's a precious collectible coin. It could be gold or silver or who knows what, with a special imprint on it or something significant to a collector. So it has value as a collectible, right? Money does have value as a collectible. But also, of course, not every piece of currency that's printed is so collectible, right? Yeah, we get that. But there are always some collectors who will collect different monies for various reasons, and that's fine. But how exactly does cash have a use beyond that, right? If you are looking at the future of money as being all digital, and what does it mean if cash is going to be a thing that we think of as, not just as, dirty money. No, it's just going to be obsolete or antiquated from a technological point of view, and most people will be using cashless payment, right? You look at how people are going to be buying coffee at Starbucks, right, for cashless payments, right? They're going to be using Bitcoin or whatever crypto there. They're going to accept Bitcoin because they just got a huge chunk of backed in exchange for promising to accept Bitcoin this year. So you'll be able to buy Starbucks coffee with Bitcoin in 2019. That's the deal they've made in exchange for being included or being invested in backed. Basically, they got a reward, if you will. What about other cashless, trends? Well, we see cashless trends all over the place. We're looking at Sweden, where roughly, I think, 1% of the population actually uses cash. There we go. 1% of its yearly transactions are in cash in Sweden. Right? They're basically done with cash. Okay, Sweden is a relatively smaller country compared to America, and they have a lot more social institutions in place to prevent people to have the same kind of problems that they would by and large in the US in terms of no access to capital, right? Because even if you're poor in Sweden, you probably still have a house and 2 cars. Yeah, I know there's very poor people everywhere, but not so much, right? Like, they really have a much more equitable society. The ultra-rich may be upset that they pay too many taxes or whatever. Generally speaking, there's not that much anger there for that reason. So for that society to move to a cashless situation makes a lot of sense. And they're very close to doing that, which is great. But again, they have a very unique set of circumstances. They don't have tens of millions of people who are poorer than dirt living in their country, right? They just don't. In America, you do have tens of millions of people who are as poor as dirt and don't have two nickels to rub together, right? Because that's just how it's been for them. They live in a very aggressive capitalist society that if you don't have the dollars, you are destitute. And there's not really much that you're going to get from social anything, as much as people want to say, as much as people freak out about socialism or social security or anything, the social contract stuff in America, healthcare or anything else. The fact is Americans pay, by and large, very little for social services, which is why they get very little social services, right? Compared to other nations where they pay exorbitant amounts, 70, 80, 90% of their money, or even 50 or 40, which is still, but remember, when Reagan was president, it was quite common for Americans to pay 40% tax under Reagan, right? A conservative, apparently. So, the situation in America is what it is, and therefore you have so many people who don't have credit cards and debit cards because the banks screwed them over, right? That's a technical term, in like 2000 to 2009 when they were selling everybody things they couldn't afford, basically making people go into a lifetime of debt and selling people bad houses, bad mortgages, bad whatever, repackaged mortgages, the whole deal. They were selling bad things to people who couldn't afford it, right? Or great things, let's say, wonderful multi-million-dollar homes, or they weren't worth that much, but let's say even $1 million home to a person who couldn't really even afford a $300,000 home. So they jacked up the prices of all the homes, or massively inflated the prices of these homes, entire market, which crushed, by the way, it helped crush the value of the dollar itself to almost nothing, because you could now get mortgages for, millions in exchange for very low interest rates. Whereas the same house 5 or 10 years before was like 20% of the price. I mean, the prices were crazy ridiculous on housing between 2000 and 2008, right after the dot-com bubble boom crashed. People who had money in .com and got out on time, a lot of them put their money in housing. Some of them did it already in the 90s. They made crazy money by the time it crashed in 2018. And the smart ones, again, they sold out by 2007. So by 2008, when the housing crash happened, they were happily out of that. And the smart ones from there jumped into crypto, or other things, right? Or back into the markets after it crashed, the regular markets. But we have a situation as a result where you literally have tens of millions of people who are dependent on cash because they can't get a credit card or debit card. And again, it's a situation aggravated by the very banks themselves, and it's one of the main reasons crypto exists in the first place. But guess what? Not everybody who is angry at the banks, or not angry but just poor, has a crypto account, and not all of them have access to it, even in America, right? You'd think they would. Maybe all they need is to know about it in order to have that access, but they don't watch this channel or any other YouTube channel about crypto, and they don't listen to podcasts about crypto, and they're not interested in this stuff for whatever reason. Maybe they're not interested because they got burned out by money and the whole rat race of chasing a dollar, and they've accepted a life of being poor because they've just been depressed about it. This could happen, right? And this has happened to millions of people. Let's not discount that people have taken a massive, massive beating from the 2008, 2009 recession. And the world has not recovered from that fully, right? So I love Bitcoin. Don't get me wrong. I think crypto is 100%, 1,000%, an infinite percent. It is the future of money and business and everything else. Not just Bitcoin, but Litecoin and Ethereum and XRP and all the good projects. Cardano, maybe, I hope. And I don't know. By the way, whatever. you know, there's no shortage of great projects that I like, that I'm even involved in. You know, I've spoken about EthLyte. I love EthLyte. I think it's a great project. You know, I market for EthLyte. I'm happily to do it because I think it's amazing to make a cryptocurrency that brings the value of asset transfer as an included and embedded protocol layer inside of the internet, right? Inside the cryptocurrency itself. And you don't even need the internet, actually, but, you know, most of them are built on the internet, or they are built on the internet, even if they allow you to communicate with it in other systems, like by ham radio or satellite or anything like that, which has been done and is increasingly being done. So I think all this technology of crypto, it's amazing, and it's wonderful that it's a response to the institutions that screwed over so many people. But here's the thing. We also need to go about to educate the other people who got screwed over and don't know about crypto or don't know enough about it and haven't jumped in yet because they don't have access or whatever, right? There needs to be a way to onboard them that lets them make the choice to not need cash. Because here's the thing. I actually think that the move in Philadelphia and New Jersey to outright ban cashless stores, while not in the long-term interests necessarily of business, it is in the interests of businesses, and more importantly, it's in the interest of the people until such time as cash is really not necessary because nobody actually uses it. Let cash die the way of the public phone, right? Do you remember public phone booths? Right? When was the last time you used one? Maybe you had to use one because of an emergency in the last, what, year, 5 years, 10 years? What? When was the last time you actually had to use a public phone because you didn't have a mobile phone on you, or you didn't have someone right next to you that you could ask for a quick phone call to make on their public phone, on their mobile phone? When was the last time that happened to you? Because from what I remember, everyone used public phones in like up until this, the 80s and mid 90s. And then once everybody, started getting cell phones, public phones very quickly started going the way of the dodo, right? They just started disappearing more and more. And pretty soon you had a case where if you didn't have a mobile phone or access to a phone somewhere, wherever you were in public, it was hard to find a public phone. And in some places, they're practically impossible. In fact, they're virtually impossible now in many places, right? Probably most cities at this point. They're hard to find because you don't need them anymore, right? But until they were no longer necessary at all, it was actually important to maintain a certain number of them to ensure that anybody who needed to make a phone call could do so. Because telecommunications is a public utility. And that was something that was a debate for a long time. Is telecom a public utility? Well, and then, yes, it was proven to be so because everybody had phones, right? Everybody had multiple phones even. Multiple phone lines in the same house. And what was done about that? What was done about that is that they ended up breaking up the monopoly, right? Ma Bell had all the phones in America. Right, they controlled all the phone calls. So they broke it up because it was a big stagnating monopoly, and it wasn't offering new services, and it was just charging people more and more for the same phone call. What's the deal? Why would it cost you more to call from New York to Los Angeles or Washington to Paris or whatever? Why should it cost you more on any given year, not less? Right? They were starting to get greedy. Right? And again, by saying costing more, I mean even if the price stayed the same. Even if it was 10 cents a minute, and it used to be that, I remember that, even $1 a minute to call internationally or whatever, even if your price stayed the same, given that the dollar devaluates, every year, right, a little bit, a couple percent, that means every year you were paying more and more for the same phone call, right? So they broke up the phone company, and they made it so that there were at least 7 of them that all had to compete. Right? There was Southwest Bell and all these, like NYNEX and all these. There were a bunch of different phone companies that Ma Bell got split up into that it had to compete with itself, essentially, by region. And then what did they do? They made it But the thing is, they were competing by region, but they were, they were still kind of monopolies within their region. Bell South versus whoever. But there were some competing territories that they could, sort of both attempt to go for. And then there were other players who got involved, like much smaller companies, newer companies, and they all came along. Sprint and MCI and everybody came along with to fight the land grab, and all of the telecom. Devolution and re-regulation and everything else that followed, what happened? You had more competition, you had more services, more offerings, lower prices, better value, better services, better products. All this stuff was happening. You started getting caller ID, you started getting, caller star 69, you started getting voicemail, you started getting whatever it was. The new services were being added. You could get a second line for free, or get call waiting. I say call waiting, call waiting. All these different kind of services that they were adding on, right? And that hadn't happened under the monopoly, but breaking it up and forcing the decentralization did. So it's another argument, another case for why decentralization matters so much, right? But again, people had to have access. Right? When they broke that up, they had to have access to public phones until they were no longer necessary. Because otherwise, you would be disenfranchising, in a country as big and significant as America, you would be disenfranchising tens of millions, possibly 100 million or more, people who might not have access as regularly as you do, or as regularly as the average American might have. Well, I guess if there's 100 million of them, that'd be pretty close to the average. But even if it's 70 million people, 80 million people might not have access, that would have been enormous and a huge problem. So they had to keep those things maintained across the nation, despite the fact that a growing number of people were not even ever touching a public phone again. And their children will never know what those things were, right? They won't remember. There was a time when there were public phones, and we used to all use them occasionally. So that's why I think, cash, as much as you might hate it for a lot of good reasons, it's very, and I don't really know anybody who hates cash, but cash is very important. Not just for people who want to make big purchases for, in anonymously or quietly or whatever, and without being on the system. Cash is important for those who don't have any other means, because it's the most accessible form of money currently in society. Now, it's not the most accessible if you're wealthy. It's not the most accessible if you're even of average means, because you can just use your credit card. But if you're a poor person, and by that I mean if you're even a working poor person, you get up and go to work every day, but you still don't have enough money to get out of debt. That's a working poor person. Doesn't make any sense, but there are people like that. And there are millions and millions of them. And the reason that they're like that is because the very banking system that is now, giving away cash at rock bottom prices for the past number of years, put them into debt, made them go broke by imposing ridiculous things like charging people for not having money in their bank account. Like if you know their payment cycle and you just screw them over with late fees and everything else, even though you know their monthly cycle or whatever. Or selling people mortgages they couldn't afford. That's far worse than charging people late fees in their bank account, by the way. Because you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to people who shouldn't have received a tenth of that, right? But they did. So there's no shortage of people who need cash because the banks caused it to be that way. A solution to that would be for those very banks to provide a cashless solution, right? Like anyone who got screwed out of the financial system 10 years ago and would like to be involved in it again for whatever reason, or would like to at least have reasonable access to a modest amount of means for emergencies, they should be able to open an account, even if it's just a debit account, and get a debit card, right? No matter what their credit history is. A debit is, like you're not borrowing money on a debit card. It's your money. So there's really no reason for anybody to be prevented from having that, right? And you don't have to. You can set up a Bitcoin wallet. You can set up an Ethereum wallet. You can set up a XRP wallet, and you can, for free, have those wallets. But it's a matter of education. And not everybody who is uneducated, especially about Bitcoin or crypto, and that includes very smart people who just aren't educated about crypto yet because they haven't learned about it. It's still a new thing, relatively. That means that you still have many, many people, and it's most people at this point, who still use cash in the US, and many, many people who need to use cash and coins, right? It's not that they want to, even. They'd love to have a credit card. Maybe. But they'd like to have a credit card that maybe doesn't vulturize them the way they got vulturized. Is that a word? Vulturized? I don't think that's a word, but they got taken to the cleaners by the guys and girls who lent them a lot of money when it was cheap, and then sold them, a bad set of goods. And therefore, you have people who went into massive debts. And I'm not justifying their stupid decision-making, at all. Right? I think if you bought a house for millions of dollars that you couldn't afford, well, that's your mistake. And if you're too stupid to have read what you were buying for that amount of money, there's no helping you. I mean, it's kind of hard, right, to justify, well, why should you keep just sucking off millions and millions of dollars each time you make a mistake? Someone has to pay for that mistake. But on the other hand, there are huge numbers of people, not 1 or 2% of these people that fell victim. An enormous chunk of the people who got screwed on their housing deals in between 2000 and 2008, a disproportionately enormous amount of people were not ignorant, naive, or didn't read the terms. They were knowledgeable. They were clearly aware of what they were doing. They had read the terms. And they still got screwed over because of a number of things. And again, I'm not justifying the foolish behavior of people who bought things they shouldn't have. But there are still a lot of people who bought things they shouldn't have, who you could easily say were borderline, right? And they maybe could have had those things if things had been a little different in the market, or if the bankers had been a little more honest with them, or if, the mortgage, whatever it was, right? There's no shortage of people who really suffered. Right? By the way, I didn't lose a house or anything like that, or did I? Well, it wasn't my house, that's for sure. I did not lose a house in that crash. Right? I didn't own any houses or properties. Didn't lose a house. But I know people who did. People very close to me as well. So I'm aware of the pain and suffering that it costs. And it affected me, not directly, but it did affect me. And I still see the damage that it has cost to many people around the world, not just in the U.S. Because, by the way, a lot of people who invested in American homes were foreigners who bought a lot of properties with the idea to flip them and make their own American dream from far away, or even those who had moved to the U.S. wanted to live the American dream, and they've been sold on it by the American banking system, which is pumping out all this cash relentlessly. And we're seeing the last, of course, the Democrats and the Republicans, right? But, the Democrats more. But, of course, the Democrats and Republicans are going nuts about cash, right? They don't want the central banking to stop. Clearly, it's in their interest to keep it going. That's obvious. That's how they make their money. They don't have a system in place yet across the U.S. to accept crypto, right? We see it in Ohio, we see it in, Montana or Wyoming or whatever. We're starting to see it in different places, but it's not yet a national thing. You can't just accept crypto as your default payment because not everybody has it, not everybody uses it, and not every jurisdiction even recognizes it, right? Just look at New York. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that. I don't want to go on too long about it, but I do want to stress the fact that until cash is really useless, in the sense that nobody uses it because everyone has already chosen to move to digital money, one way or the other, until that time, any government that wants to enforce laws within a jurisdiction must make means available, right? The access to means must be available even to the poorest of the poor. It doesn't mean you have to give them money necessarily. I mean, maybe they should get money in a country as wealthy as America. There's literally zero reason for anybody to be poor. They could just, put money in the right places and there would be nobody living below a certain standard. But they don't do that. But they could guarantee that everybody has right to a money card, right? You can go, no matter who you are, and get a money card at a kiosk or whatever. It can be anonymous, it doesn't matter. And that money card can contain digital money on it, but you're buying it even anonymously, and it wouldn't cost you anything in addition to the money you need, right? You should be able to go to a store and say, I need $50, I need a cash card, or a money card for $50 or monies or whatever on them. And even if you're piss poor, as long as you have the money worth to put on that card in cash or anything else, well, then you should be able to get a card. If you don't have any money, you don't have any cash or anything else, well, then you don't have any cash. You don't have any money in the first place. But you should be able to beg for, if you will, if you're a poor begging person, you should be able to beg for money that people can literally give you on a cash card or a card or something like that, a money card. Because then that would allow even the poorest of the poor to have access to the default currency, whatever it will be in the future, right? That's the solution. Make a thing for the very, very bottom to know that they are not left out just because we're getting rid of cash. We're replacing. It's not we're getting rid of cash. You can, educate everyone. We're not getting rid of your access to money. We're just changing what that access is. Instead of a bunch of papers and round objects, or coins, we're going to give you a piece of plastic that is good for all of that. But the problem is, of course, that a lot of things that the poorest people buy are things that aren't bought and sold on credit card, right? That's a fact. And by the way, they are like everyone else in that respect. Everyone buys a lot of things in cash for a lot of reasons that they don't want to put on credit card, right? I'm sure you've done that. Maybe you haven't. But I know that a lot of people have. They buy things they don't want recorded on a credit card for whatever reason. So, getting rid of cash removes an enormous and important layer of anonymity and protection of privacy, which does not exist on blockchain. Right? Even in Monero, ultimately, yes, you can have some kind of anonymity. It's true, and it's even uncrackable to a certain extent. It's true, but most people have no idea about that, and other things can be determined about a Monero transaction that make it not necessarily 100% anonymous. Right? It can be less than that. It depends how the transaction is done and in what context the transaction is. And if there's a history of account transactions between a Monero account and other accounts that it's transacting with. There's ways for intelligence to figure things out about Monero transactions even without having absolute 100% proof of something. They can figure it out by putting together other pieces of evidence that tie in and show that this is in fact what happened, right? You can do forensic analysis even on an anonymous coin. You won't necessarily get the same data set, but you will get data of some kind, and you can make inferences from it when you collect it with other composite data. So the cash has anonymity. And without it, the poor are even more vulnerable. And they are the most vulnerable people in society other than infants, right? Or handicapped people, or extremely frail people, whatever. The poor are among the weakest group in society because they don't have any money. It's not, they may be physically strong if they're laboring, but they don't have any money in their bank account, so they're financially weak. And therefore, they're vulnerable. Extremely, especially in a society that does not like anonymity amongst certain ethnic groups or demographic groups or socioeconomic groups or anything like that, right? The society in America, by and large, wants transparency of the things that they don't understand very well, and that very often lines up with their prejudices. And not even in a bad way. They just don't understand it, and they want to understand it, so they think more transparency is the answer. Sometimes transparency is not the answer, right? Poor people don't need to be more transparent with you. Poor people need more money, right? That's what they need. They need to be less poor, which means more money. And I'm not saying that we should just give them money, to everyone. Here's $2 million. Obviously not. That wouldn't work, right? It's not how you do it. But there are things you can do. You can give people money, for example, but you don't have to give them millions of dollars. You just need to help them get out of debt. You need to help them or get to a way where they can live, even with debt, they can still live a reasonable life and be responsible also and pay their debts, right? Like, there are ways to arrange things for people, and too many people fall between the cracks and end up destitute, end up really, really poor, just so, hungry for capital that they end up literally being slaves to the dollar for the rest of their life. I mean, and that's just a horrible thing. And in a country as wealthy as America is, it makes no sense, right? The only reason it exists is because for too long, a system has been in place that just protects increasingly the wealthy and decreasingly the poor. And, of course, those in the middle are constantly, pushed more and more down towards the poor. And the only ones that break through that are the ones fortunate enough to do so because they're smart enough or connected enough or lucky enough, right? But most people in the middle are effectively going to get pushed more and more down towards the poverty levels. It isn't that the whole is moving up, right? The ultra-rich are increasing the averages because they're gaining so much that it gives a sense to the statisticians that everything's going up. But it's not true, right? The average salary for middle-class people has collapsed in the last 40 years, right? A $100,000 job today, if it's considered it's considered a good job in America, right? 20, 30, 40 years ago, if you made 100 grand 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you were living very well in America, right? Now, if you make 100 grand, I mean, it's really not the same thing at all, right? Okay, you're probably still able to pay your bills and whatever, but $8 grand a month in America doesn't necessarily go very far. Depends where you live, right? That can be almost nothing. That can be very, very little money, 8 to 9 grand a month. That could be not enough to make it past a few weeks in some places. Now, I know on average you can live on 100 grand in America, of course, and you can live well, or pretty well, but you're not going to live nearly as well as if you had had that salary 40 years ago, right? There's no question of that because the dollar has devalued 20, 30%, 40% since then, some crazy amount of time. It's devalued 80, 90%, 95% since it was introduced in like 30s, right? Well, therefore, and the fact is salaries haven't gone up as much as the money has decreased in value, right? Salaries haven't gone up nearly as much as the rate of inflation and the cost of living and everything else. So even if you make, $2 200 grand now, and you were making 100 grand 20 years ago, your 200 grand is still not worth as much as the 100 you made 20 years ago. Which sounds crazy, but that's a fact, right? Maybe okay. So I know some of you in the VIP are gonna whip out the calculators and show me what the exact numbers are. Please do. Please write in the comments if you also know them. But you know what I'm saying. Your dollar is worth far less today than it was in the 90s, right? Or in the 70s, or in the 50s, or in the 30s when it came out. It's just not the same value. And certain cryptos alleviate or even remedy that problem by having limited supply, by having mining involved, or proof of stake, or whatever tech you want to like. The fact is, you can use crypto to solve the real world problems that cash and central banking have created. But again, until that is all solved, and until the poorest of the poor have access to digital money at the same levels of convenience and privacy and anonymity that cash offers them, it cannot be the case that America would refuse cash in stores. It cannot be the case. Even if it is increasingly the case, and we're finding local places doing it more and more, they're banning cash, whatever, not banning it, but they're allowing stores to not use cash. There will be a backlash when stores that are important for poor people to buy things in no longer accept cash. Right? Of course, it doesn't matter if Lexus doesn't accept, or Rolls-Royce, or the real estate broker. Well, real estate depends on, a luxury real estate broker may want not to accept payment in cash. However, I would argue you'll see that the ultra-rich like to pay for real estate in cash too. Not an accident, right? We all know why. It's very easy to write something down in one place and then write it down in another place, and maybe a decimal is off, or a comma, or a period. I don't know. Period is done. A number is wrong. Who knows? It's cash. But here's the thing. American central banking invented cash. Therefore, they must live with the consequences. And they invented cash. They invented cash. They invented the cash currently in use. All right? The American central banking system invented the current U.S. dollar and the current coins that it, related to it. Just like every other fiat currency was invented by its makers, right? And they must live with the consequences of doing that. And one of the consequences of that is, you can't, if you leave people in the dust just because you want to move on to something else, expect consequences. Don't expect people to just let you get away with that. You can't just let tens of million people not have access to basic products and services, That's my take on that. That's my whole take on it. And again, I would not be surprised, by the way, if a lot of the places where you're seeing rich politicians moving to protect the poor in this sense, by guaranteeing the assurance, by assuring the possibility of using cash, I would not be surprised to find even that a bunch of them are involved in scandals related to buying things in cash anonymously in order to avoid paying whatever they have to pay, in additional fees, right, to the man or whatever. So that would not surprise me. But I will say this. As long as there are poor people who need cash, I don't really care. I do care that the corrupt politician is dealt with. If they made some kind of deal and they assured cash would be allowable in order to do some shady deal, of course that shady deal should be dealt with, But that doesn't mean that cash shouldn't be allowed just because they did it, just because they wanted it for illicit reasons. There are plenty of people who want it for perfectly good reasons, even anonymously. They want to buy things anonymously for very good reasons. And if you're not in their shoes, you really, really are not in a position to say to anybody else why they should or shouldn't use cash, right? You can't assume people's motivations. You just can't. It's a mistake to do. So that's my take on that. I did want to mention, but we've been going on a little while, but I will mention this one thing. There's one interesting story here. There's so much happening in the news, but there is one interesting story here on the Daily Hodl that I thought I should bring you. And we did discuss it earlier in the lounge, so I promised to talk about it. And that is, regulators in Israel are eyeing crypto to give traditional trading a big boost. Now, we've all heard about regulators looking at using crypto for increased revenues, etc. I've been speaking about it just now, about this same topic in a different context, obviously in the US. But now we're looking at Israel, which is a leading country in terms of blockchain development, blockchain tech, blockchain ecosystem, right? And their regulators have for a while been delving into the whole crypto space and figuring out what to do about it, giving more definitions about ICOs, what is, or what it is or what it isn't. And now they're talking about they want to allow companies to fundraise by issuing digital tokens, right? Well, security token offering, anybody? Like, that's what they're saying, right? The Securities Authority wants to allow tokens as a security tokens. And they think that basically they've been looking at traditional activity, they've been looking at crypto activity. The committee has been studying for years blockchain and crypto. And effectively, right, even though they say that there's a downturn in ICOs, which obviously there is a downturn in ICOs, there's still excitement, right? The tech is not going to disappear, right? Even though the hyper excitement, the FOMO and all that nonsense, that left, it will come back, but that left. What we have now is excitement around the actual technology, the actual use cases, the actual future of crypto for business, right? And that could be, think about how significant that is. If you have a business and you want to grow your marketing, now you can all of a sudden run a securities token offering to fundraise to make, your next big project or brand or campaign that you're going to market, right? So you could literally crowdfund, increase your ability to build a better product or service, and at the same time also increase your ability to market it, because you can use, some reasonable portion. Obviously, if you have it well described in your white paper or your business plan or your marketing material, and you show people this is what we're going to do, with the marketing and everything, and they can get on board, and you can therefore have a much more successful business, and your marketing can reach much better records, right? Much better ROI, much better, visitor rates, much better conversion rates, much better loyalty rates, whatever it is your business focuses on as its business drivers. However you look at your business from the KPI point of view, or managing the effective, success or failure rates of your marketing, crypto will let you do that better. And so it makes a lot of sense for companies in a country like Israel, where blockchain is an increasingly important ecosystem, and where the country is an increasingly important leader in the field. It makes a lot of sense that there would be this discussion by the Israel Securities Authority to see about whether or not they can make crypto assets defined as securities or whatever they want. They're not the first country, right, to be doing this, but they're one of the earliest ones. And we see, for example, like, other countries have gone against the crypto trend. However, you have different countries with different politics. So, for example, in England, they say crypto is not currency or money. Right? The Bank of England. What a shock! The Bank of England, under the sovereign leadership of the Queen, who is the head of state, the figurehead of state, symbolic head of state, and she is on all the money. And her money is the only allowed money in England, right? You could exchange money, of course you can, but I'm saying in terms of an authorized official currency of the country. The only one is a pound, right? Obviously, it's their fiat currency. But remember, the Bank of England, under the royal family, has a history of, hey, when they made gold, when they took the pound off of the gold standard, that was enforced by force. They went around and collected all the gold that people had and said, no, we're giving you paper instead. Outright theft, right? So for the Bank of England, which are classic banksters, classic institutional banksters, love them or hate them. I'm not, bankers are not all evil people, but banks are pretty bad. All in all, they have a bad history, right? They don't only have they have a great history for many people who've made a lot of money and whatever. Wonderful. They're great. But they've also done some awful things. And they get away with it because they're banksters. Right? And we all know about that. So I'm not going to go on about that for too long, but I'm going to say I view this as a positive step for marketing of crypto. Because if in Israel you're allowed to fundraise using crypto, that will do wonders for any company that's based in Israel or works with Israeli companies that are doing any kind of digital tokens, and they're trying to market them in any way, right? All in all, two very good stories. One is, again, I think the first story went over is requiring cash to be available. I think that's a good thing. As much as I love crypto, you can't just get rid of cash until digital is really accessible to everyone with anonymity and privacy the way cash is available for the protection of the poor. That's the number one reason to do that. And if that is denied to them, I do consider that to be a violation of their human rights and their civil rights. 100%. Because in America, you need money. Like really badly, right? Like, okay, there are places I'm sure you need less money. I know there are places in America you need less money than others. But if you are like one of the 80% of the people who lives in a metro area and you don't really have the ability to leave that area with any, you can't just pick up and go so easily because you're stuck there. Or even if you're just mentally stuck, you're stuck there. You need money. You can't just live in an American city without money. It's very hard. You could, but it's not everybody wants to be a scavenger. And not everybody wants to be homeless or whatever. Not everybody owns their own home without having to worry about paying anything. And not everybody has free water or free electricity. You need money, right? Like you do in most places. But that's what I'm saying, is America, you need money. So cash has to be allowed. Anyway, folks, that's going to do it for today. I've been going on a long time. But yeah, you know what? It's Friday morning, Friday evening, Friday night, wherever you are. That's what's going on in the world of marketing crypto insights. And I hope that you've been interested in this topic and learned something from it. If you have, if you found anything of use, please let us know. If you're here in the comments of the YouTube, that'd be great. In the VIP room, again, I want to thank everybody for coming around and making this show possible. For those of you who asked us to set up a Patreon page, we did. If any of you actually want to use it, that'd be fine. You don't have to, no obligation, but you do get many wonderful things in return for your support, but that's entirely up to you. And again, do not ever feel obliged to support us like that, especially if you're in the VIP lounge already, because, well, you know why. And if you're on our YouTube channel and you want to get the latest updates from us, be sure to hit the notification button after you subscribe, hopefully. And yeah, definitely take a look at our videos. You can watch existing videos that we posted in the archives here on the playlists. If you see any that you like, be sure to share. Be sure to tell other people around you what it is you like about our show, what you find useful about it. We're always interested in hearing what people like and don't like about the show so that we can improve the content. So with that said, folks, I just want to thank everybody one more time for coming here, listening to us, listening to this show, listening to me talk about crypto, give you my opinions about it. Hope you've found it useful and that whatever you're doing, wherever you are, you're having a great time and you're making the most from the experience, and that if you're marketing, you're crushing it. Because ultimately, that's what we're here to do, to help you crush your marketing goals with brilliant blockchain marketing insights. So until next time, folks, take care.